Your Superior Self, Episode 18.
First thing you have to do, I need you guys to play as hard as you're capable of playing. And when I say play, even if you don't get a chance to see the court, even if coach never calls your number and you're sitting on the bench the whole time, you need to play your role as hard as you're capable of. I don't care if your role is to be the number one guy on offense or your role is you're the 15th man. You better cheer your ass off tonight. You need to give your best effort. You need to play as hard as you're capable of playing every single possession. Not when you feel like it, not when coach is yelling at you, not when you want to, not when things are going well. You play as hard as you can or you cheer as hard as you can every single possession. You run up and down the floor like there's a dog chasing you every single time. You box out every single time there's a shot taken. Not when you feel like it, not when you want to, not when somebody in another jersey is conveniently next to you. Every single time a shot goes up, you lay a body on somebody.
That's what I'm talking about. Run down the court like a dog is chasing you. That's the kind of motivation I need sometimes. And that's Alan Stein Jr. giving that motivational speech to a men's high school basketball game. Alan Stein is a performance coach, consultant, speaker, and author. He has spent 15 years working with elite athletes in the NBA, players like Kevin Durant and Kobe Bryant. Alan delivers high-energy keynotes in an interactive workshop to improve performance, cohesion, and accountability. He inspires and empowers everyone he works with to take immediate action and improve their mindset and habits as well as productivity. Alan's also has said my favorite quote as of recent. He says, "Be where your feet are." And he says it in this interview, and it made me realize that I need to be in the moment and not let it waste away and miss anything that might happen that could be a great memory, that could be a connection, that can be of substance. Example would be something with your kids, being on your phone. You got to disconnect, being with your wife. Even though you guys might be watching TV, you guys need to connect, disconnect, be where your feet are, and reconnect. And that has really changed the way that I have viewed family life as well as professional. Whenever I'm in a meeting with coworkers or my employees, it makes me realize to focus on their needs and how can I help them? How can I be the best version of a boss that they need right then and there? So if you haven't done already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast as well as leave a rating and a review. Check me out on Instagram at tdowns80 as well as Twitter at downstrey. And without further ado, here's Alan Stein Jr. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Today on the show, I have Alan Stein Jr. joining us, motivational speaker. Alan, welcome to the show.
Oh, man, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Trey.
So, Alan, I watched all your YouTube stuff. I've seen your TED Talk X Baylor. Very good stuff. Awesome motivational piece. But everything seems to wrap around basketball. How important is basketball to you, and how much has it inspired your path?
Basketball is been my number one passion for as long as I can remember. It's the first thing that I really, truly fell in love with, probably around kindergarten or first grade. I was incredibly active as a kid and played every sport and did just about every activity. I mean, you've got your conventional sports like football and baseball and soccer, but I did martial arts, BMX biking, skateboarding. I mean, I tried just about everything. And no matter what I tried, I always came back to basketball. There was just something about the game that really attracted me. And I'm 42 years old, so if we rewind the clock, when I'm getting into basketball, this is kind of, at the heyday of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and just at the onset of Michael Jordan. So like a lot of kids in middle-class suburban households, I had, wall-to-wall posters of Michael Jordan. Many people give him credit for elevating the NBA to a global status. So that just increased my passion. And really enjoyed the game all the way through high school and was fortunate enough to play in college and knew that I wanted to make my living in the game, and thankfully was able to find a niche that allowed for that.
Yeah, definitely. Michael Jordan was definitely my favorite player growing up, even though I couldn't watch any of his games because we lived in a very rural area and we only had 3 channels. So basketball wasn't really on any of those. But nonetheless, you knew who Michael Jordan was. Everybody was wearing his shoes. Everybody was eating the Wheaties. We knew who he was. But for my listeners that don't really know your background, Alan, so why don't you go ahead and give us like a quick bio and what you're up to today?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I was a pretty good high school player, and when I say pretty good, I just mean at a local public school outside of Washington, D.C., was, kind of an all-county level player, so pretty decent. Was able to play at Elon, which it was Elon College at the time. It's now Elon University. Elon was Division II when I went there, and then turned Division I while I was there. So I was part of one of the classes that they made the switch. So by that definition, I was a fairly decent player, but certainly, was not going to have an opportunity to play after college. I mean, I was a mediocre college player at best, and that might be gracious. But I knew how much I loved the game, and I knew that was where I wanted to make my living. Was in that space, and around that time, I graduated in 1998 from college. There really weren't basketball strength and conditioning coaches the way that we know it today. In fact, less than a third of NBA teams at that time even had a strength and conditioning consultant. And when I was in college, the strength and conditioning portion, the plyometrics and lifting weights and all of that stuff was so new, and it was kind of out of the box. But it was something I really gravitated towards. I'm an average size. I'm 6'1". Okay athleticism, but nothing to write home about. So I was looking for any competitive advantage that I could get as a player, and I found that if I lifted weights and I ran sprints and I did metrics and got myself in really good basketball shape, that kind of elevated my game up a notch. So I started to develop this equal affinity for performance training and realized that, hey, this must be my calling. I love basketball and I love performance training, even though it's not a red hot industry at the time. Why don't I give it a try and become a basketball performance coach? So I was a little bit ahead of the curve in doing that in the late 90s and early 2000s, but had a blast doing it. And I moved back to the DC area and started training players. And, I know you asked for the short version. So the short version is I got plugged in at Montrose Christian, which is here in Rockville, Maryland. I think we had 7 or 8 players in the NBA, but Kevin Durant is the most notable. Kevin graduated from Montrose. When I left Montrose, was just ready for a new challenge. I went to DeMatha Catholic High School, which has been a powerhouse in high school basketball for 50 years, and was able to work with Victor Oladipo, who plays for the Pacers, Markelle Fultz, who was last year's #1 pick in the NBA draft, Quinn Cook, who plays for the Golden State Warriors, Jeremy and Jerian Grant. I mean, we had a lot of really good players. So in my time at Montrose and DeMatha, in those 13 years, I think we ended up with maybe 15 or 16 players in the NBA, not because of my doing, because we had really, really talented players. But I got to be in the lab, work on my craft with elite level players. And for a young, learning, and hungry coach, there's nothing better than having a chance to work with incredibly gifted kids to sharpen your sword and master your craft. And because both of those schools were Nike elite schools, they were both sponsored by Nike. That got me introduced to Nike basketball and Jordan Brand and USA basketball. So then I was able to start working events for those big companies. And that's what allowed me to work Nike's Summer Skills Academy. So I got to work events for LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis and Steve Nash and Paul Pierce. So it was incredible. And they brought in top level players. They brought in top level coaches. And I got to be there doing my thing. So it was the best of both worlds. I mean, there I am getting a chance to work with elite level players, but I'm also there to watch guys like Kobe and LeBron and what they do behind the scenes. And then at night have sessions with NBA level coaches and get to pick their brains and talk to them. So it was really a very fertile ground for me to learn and develop my craft. And I was able to do that for, 7, 8, 9 years straight. And incredibly thankful for that. So that was kind of what allowed me to be a fly on the wall and see things like Kobe's private workouts and what guys like LeBron and Steph Curry do behind the scenes. And then I've always felt it was my duty, since I was incredibly fortunate to have an opportunity to see stuff like that. I know that most people aren't, so I felt it's my duty to kind of share those lessons with other people, and began first sharing them in the basketball community, and now I share them, all over the world in the corporate space, and teach businesses how to improve their performance using the same type of sets and skill sets that a guy like Kobe or LeBron does, just applied to business.
Sure. So you go from the athletic world, picking up all kinds of inspirational advice and tactics and skills. And what inspired you to go over to the corporate side?
Honestly, I was ready for a change. I mean, the big need was, I'm real big into self-development and growth and constant improvement. And I found that after almost 20 years in the basketball space, that I was starting to stagnate. I mean, I was reading books on leadership and so forth, but I was spending most of my time in gyms with high school age players. And I enjoyed that. And I always want to serve that group, because it means a lot to me. But as you can probably imagine, if you spend most of your time with 15 to 18-year-old boys, I mean, they only think about two things. They think about basketball, and what the other one is. So yeah. I really wasn't being challenged or stimulated intellectually or emotionally. And I had this thirst to learn more about leadership and standards and culture and accountability and cohesion. And I don't want to be over dramatic and say that I learned everything that I was going to learn from basketball, because I don't think you're ever done learning. Sure. But I felt that I had kind of tapped out what I was going to learn in that space. And I was just ready for a change. And, I was ready to accept the challenge of going over to an industry where, I've never had a corporate job in my life. So there was a huge learning curve. So I had to spend time really studying business and learning, from folks in sales and folks that are executives and C-suite executives, and learn what their trade is, so that I can apply the skills that I have to what they're doing. And, I make sure that I stay in my lane when I go speak to a company. I'm not talking to them about business strategy or profit and loss or marketing, because that's not what I do. I'm talking to them about how they can master the basics, how to improve communication and be more effective and influential with the folks that they work with, how they can create higher standards and collectively hold everyone accountable and get people to buy in and believe in. Because, I believe with every ounce of my being that stuff is the foundation of any good organization, whether it's a team or a business. And if you have that stuff in place, then if you apply a really good product or a really good service, or, you have a really good business strategy, that's the only time you'll be able to really flourish. And it's amazing when I see, you take somebody like the Golden State Warriors or the New England Patriots, two really successful cultures. They parallel when you go on the other side and you look at someone like Apple or Google or American Express. There are so many similarities. It's really fascinating. And that's why I've been able to kind of start to make a name in this space, because there is a very high transfer.
So you mentioned there are similarities between the two worlds. You coming from the basketball world and sports world and coming in with a fresh set of eyes and a new perspective. Tell us some of the differences that you noticed right out of the gate to be able to help implement some of your processes and strengths into the business world.
Well, and I'll answer that in just a second, but just so you know how, and this is the way that my mind works, because I'm an incredibly competitive person, and to thrive in any business, you need to find a competitive advantage. And where someone could say, why would you bring Alan in to speak? He has zero experience in the corporate world. I can easily flip that around. And I say this not to manipulate the game, but because I truly believe it. I say that the fact that I don't have any corporate experience is a major, that's my strongest point. That's because I'm going to come in with a completely fresh perspective. If you only bring in people that look at things the same way that you look at them, you're probably not apt to change or not be open to change. So, I convince companies that, hey, you want someone to come in that's never sat in a cubicle from 9 to 5, for 20 years, because I'm going to come in with a fresh perspective. So I actually think that's one of my major benefits and strong suits. So it's just like, anything. If you have a basketball team that's made up of mostly guards, well, then you need to probably play an up-tempo, fast-paced game. Like, you need to play with the hand that you're dealt. And since I've been dealt the hand of not having corporate experience, I need to play that to the best of my ability.
Sure.
But back to your original question, I mean, as far as the differences, I mean, they're really few and far between as far as when we're talking about just general principles of leadership, cohesion, accountability, how you get buy-in, how you create culture, how you show people that you appreciate them, how you show people that you care by giving them your undivided attention. All of that stuff is really the same. The differences are kind of the X's and O's. Kobe Bryant needs to work on his footwork and his jump shot, whereas somebody on the business side, might need to work on a sales process or a business or marketing plan. But really the fundamentals don't change very much at all. And that's what I've learned too, being around high performers. A guy like Kobe Bryant will study high performers in other areas. He'll study, what does Justin Timberlake do to prepare for a tour? He'll study, what does Warren Buffett do to, be as dominant as he is in the financial world? They don't just study other basketball players or other athletes. They study everybody. And I think that's one of the reasons that they're so successful. And, you hear that all the time. I think I just saw something the other day that said Kobe stopped by the New England Patriots for their kind of preseason workouts to talk to those guys. And it's funny because those guys are professional athletes. They're the best in the world at football. And they're like little kids in a candy store, like goo eyes being around Kobe Bryant because he's somebody that they look up to, even though he's in a different industry. So, yeah, for me, there's not much difference outside of the obvious. I mean, sports are based heavily on physical preparation. So, guys need to be in tip-top shape. And while I do believe that it serves an executive well to be in good physical condition and to eat well and to get good sleep, I think they'll just perform better. It's obviously not as important for an executive at Apple to have a 40-inch vertical as it might be for someone playing basketball. But outside of that, man, the fundamentals really don't change.
If someone at Google has a 40-inch vertical, there's no way that's legit. Like, they are definitely cheating.
Well, they're probably doing it mathematically. They've figured out wind resistance and some type of formula. But yeah, it's really awesome. It's not that much difference. And which to me makes it a lot of fun. But the cool part for me now from a learning standpoint is, I was just up at American Express a couple weeks ago in New York talking at one of their summits, and I'm there and I'm speaking and I'm sharing and I'm hoping that people in the audience are learning and getting some practical, tangible strategies to implement. But then while I'm there, I'm hearing other speakers and I'm talking to other people in the audience, and I end up leaving an event where I'm the keynote speaker and I leave with 20 pages of notes that all helped me. So that was one of the major reasons of me making that switch is, I felt like I've kind of had a chance to reinvent myself and reinvigorate myself because now I'm just constantly learning. And it brings me back to my first few years in basketball where that was the case. I mean, when I first started as a performance coach, I didn't know anything. Everything I was learning was valuable, and certainly not to imply that 20 years later I had all the answers, because I don't think anyone ever does. And I still had room to grow as a performance coach, but that window had narrowed. And more importantly, it just wasn't as exciting to me. To learn a new exercise to help a player run faster just doesn't excite me as much as maybe learning something that can help someone be a better leader.
Sure. That's awesome. So in your TED Talk, you talk about the basics. How do I, what are the basics and how do I apply them to my life?
Yeah, well, it's funny because that's really how I start most of my workshops. And you just asked me that, which is an incredibly insightful question. But what I do is I turn around and that's what I ask of other people and say, okay, let's look at an area of your life that you feel like could be better. It could be your marriage. It could be your business. It could be, it could be anything. And then say, okay, what are the basics of your business? And, without kind of leading the witness, when I start asking most people about business, regardless of whether it's a service or a product, on some level, it usually comes down to sales, because you have to sell something. You're either selling a service or you're selling a product, and you're either selling something that doesn't cost a lot to a lot of people, or you're selling something that costs a tremendous amount to a few people. Or if you can mix those, then you're one of the Goliaths in business. But ultimately, you have to sell something. And then I start, okay, well, what are the basics of sales? Well, communication. Okay, well, what's a basic of communication? Listening. Well, what's one of the most basic components of listening? Well, you want to be an active listener, an empathetic listener. You want to care what the other person's saying. Okay, so let's say active listening is a basic of business. How often are your people practicing the skill of actively listening, of listening to connect, not listening to respond, of listening to learn, not listening to reply? These are basic skills, but they're easily skipped over. When it comes to sales, telling is not selling. And I see young salespeople all the time. They make that mistake. They walk in and they try to talk all about their features and benefits, and they basically talk themselves out of a sale. The best salespeople I've ever been around, they ask 90% questions. They do very little telling. They ask a question, and then depending on what that answer is, they ask another question, and they ask another question. And they don't convince anyone to buy. They ultimately get the person to convince themselves that they are the solution to the problem that they have. And, really, and I've learned this from a lot of the mentors that I have, you're not there to sell anything. You're there to solve a problem. And if you ask the right questions, someone will see that you can solve their problem. And when you can solve their problem, you've got them. They want to buy from you, and it's a good fit. So I don't say you've got them in a manipulative way. You have something that will benefit them because it solves their problem, and they will happily pay for it. So, one could also make an argument, and I say this tongue in cheek because I'm amicably divorced. So I'm the last person to give marital advice. But I tell you what, if you want to improve any relationship immediately, whether it's with your wife or whether it's with your children or whether it's with a coworker, immediately, if you become a better listener, if you become an active listener, you will have a stronger connection and a better relationship. And, talk about a basic, but how many, married couples that are having some difficulties, they don't listen to each other. They don't listen with an empathetic ear. They're always blaming and keeping score. And, so listening is, I think listening is to life what footwork is to basketball. Why Kobe spends so much time working on pivoting drills and offensive moves. We should all be working on skills like listening. And that's just one of them. That's not the only, but that's, to me, that's one of the most important. But, it'd be very rare that you'd walk into any business right now and hear them emphasizing how important it is to be a good listener. But if I had a sales team, that would be something we would practice regularly.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of the not listening part. I mean, I have selective hearing for the most part, and it's kind of like I'm guilty of that as well. And I definitely need to get back to that basic. But looking at your tape on your website and doing my research on you on YouTube and watching your speeches and talks, I mean, you're phenomenal speaker, man. Like, I mean, it's awesome.
Thank you.
I want to know, what was that first talk like for you? Like, what was your first motivational speech, and how was that for you? I mean, were you nervous? How did you get prepared for that?
Well, it's kind of funny. So at the time of this recording, 2 days ago, I had a chance to give my first ever commencement speech at a graduation at a local high school. I was talking in front of 4,000 people, which is the biggest crowd I've ever spoke to. And nice. I brought my children with me. So I have 8-year-old twin sons and a 6-year-old daughter. And we got there super early, and we walked out on the stage before anyone was in there. And it's got the bright lights, and you can see 5,000 seats. And my son, Jack, who's 8, he just looked at me and he said, Daddy, you're going to talk to all of these people? And I said, yeah. And he said, are you scared? And I said, no, I'm not scared. And he said, you're not? I would be. And I said, yeah, buddy, but I've prepared. Like, I've practiced. Now, I'll have some appropriate butterflies. I'll have kind of those pregame jitters, which I think are very, very healthy, and they keep you sharp. But I'm definitely not scared because I've practiced and I've prepared for this. And, for me, that was a nice father-son connection to make that point to him. It wasn't about not having fear, because I have plenty of fears, but it was about that I was prepared for that. But to answer your original question, in fairness, even though I've only been on the corporate side for a year and a half, I've been speaking publicly for a decade. I mean, I was traveling the world speaking at basketball clinics. I mean, literally 15, 16 different countries. I think I've spoken at a basketball clinic in, I believe, 45 of the 50 states. And I would speak to hundreds of groups of coaches and teach them how to train their players. So when I go back to the very beginning of speaking at clinics, it certainly was raw and unpolished. But that was 10, 12 years ago. So when it comes to the corporate speaking, I mean, I had a running head start. I mean, first of all, I like being in front of people. I know that most people have the deathly fear of public speaking, but for some reason, I'm afraid of a lot of things in this world. That's not one of them. I actually like it. So that gave me a head start. But It actually happened almost by chance. I was in Germany speaking at a big basketball clinic, an international event, and I got back, and a few days later, a friend of mine that works at a local health club in the DC area said, we're holding a big retreat for all of our fitness folks and executives. We got a couple hundred people in Cancun, Mexico, and we're looking for a leadership speaker. I've seen you speak on basketball, but is that something you'd want to do? And I said, yes, absolutely. You had me at Cancun, and I went out to Cancun, and that was really my first official corporate talk. And I mean, I caught the bug. I walked off of that stage and said, this is my next chapter. This is what I'm being called to do. As I go back and look at that film, I mean, it almost makes my stomach turn now because I feel that I've improved tremendously since then. But, I take solace in the fact that at the time, it was the best that I was capable of doing, and I did a decent job. But, I believe in continually working on my craft. I have a speaking coach. I have a writing coach. I have all sorts of people in my life that mentor me and help me become the best speaker that I can be. And if there was one adjective that I would hope someone would use to describe me, I hope being coachable is one of them. I would hope that if you talk to anybody – now, I was not particularly coachable when I was in high school. I was a know-it-all. I was stubborn. I was anything but. But now in these last few years, I'd really like to believe that I'm coachable and that I'm open to feedback. And, I film every single talk that I do, and I go back and I watch it myself, and I look at it with a lady that's a mentor of mine that's kind of a speaking coach and an agent and a director and manages a lot of stuff for me. And I'm very open to her feedback. And if she says, hey, you need to slow down and you need to have more pauses in between, then that's something I'm conscious of, and that's something I can work on. Just like a basketball player might need to be conscious of the fact that, they're using their guide hand to flick their wrist and shoot the ball. I'm conscious of that. And then it's just a matter of reps. Then every time I go out to speak, my goal is to get just a little bit better, is to take that coaching and that feedback and implement it and get a little better. So my goal is the next talk I give will always be the best talk that I've ever given. And of course, that's not always the case, but that is always the goal. And right now, the next talk I give in a few days will be the best that I'm capable of. And then if you and I grab coffee a year from now, I'm confident I'll be able to look you in the eye and say, hey, I'm better today than I was a year ago when you had me on your podcast. So to me, that's really, really important. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by being very intentional, very purposeful, being open to feedback, and then taking that feedback and actually doing something with it. I mean, if my speaking coach keeps telling me that I need to pause and I never do, then what's the point of getting feedback if you're not going to use it? It's like having a shelf full of books that you've never read. Like, you ain't getting any smarter by having a book on your shelf. You got to open that thing and read it and then actually implement it. So I think for any of us trying to work on our craft, that's incredibly important.
That's awesome. Yeah, you got to have a ton of discipline. You can't get there on talent alone. I know playing football, watching film, that was like my nightmare. Like, that was my fears, watching film with my coaches and being picked apart. And I can't imagine doing, communication wise. I mean, that's one of my major fears. And that's one of my goals down the line, is to be able to speak publicly and execute that fairly well. And I know how tough it is, and I commend you on it. You definitely, like me and my buddy today, were like, man, he's like legit. He's like giving this TED talk like no problem whatsoever. Well,
I appreciate that. Well, and I'll say this because I've hosted two different podcasts. They were both in the basketball space, so a very niche market to serve high school coaches. But I believe with the two combined, I think I recorded, 550 episodes over 4 or 5 years. I mean, a lot. And same thing. I mean, because I still have it. I save everything. I can go back and listen to my very first podcast, and literally it makes my stomach turn. I sound robotic. I sound scared. I sound like I'm reading from notes because I was reading from notes. And I listened to my most recent podcast, which was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and it was definitely better. So,
sure.
I completely empathize and appreciate, kind of the fear and the insecurity of doing that. But if you want to get good at your craft, you absolutely need to do it. Listen to every podcast you record, listen to every video and watch every video. And it will be painful at first, but it will get better. And I do believe, just like with football or just like with basketball, film can be your best teacher. I mean, a kid can tell me all the time, Coach, I'm hustling as hard as I can. I'm hustling. All right, let's go back and watch this film. Look at
Yeah.
you. You are
Yeah.
clearly loafing back on defense. Unless you're going to look me in the eye and tell me that that's as fast as you're capable of running, then can we agree that you're not playing as hard as you can play? And they have no out because film doesn't lie.
Yeah.
And same thing, and it's weird because even from a speaking standpoint, I mean, my commencement address the other day at that high school graduation was 8 minutes long. And when it was over, I mean, I barely remember. It was almost like an out-of-body experience. I couldn't even remember. I had to go up and ask my brother who was filming it. I was like, man, I don't even know how I just did. How was that? And I had to watch the film the next morning before I could even realize but then I could go back and watch the film and go, okay, hey, this part was pretty good. I should have paused longer here. Oh, shoot. I had a perfect chance to really give a warm smile here, and I didn't. Here's when I could have used a hand gesture, and I didn't. So I just study those things. And, over time I've learned I'm going to be my biggest self-critic. I'll always be way more critical of myself than anyone will ever be of me. But I'm trying to balance that out with some grace and compassion so that I'm not beating myself up over it. I watch, just like you could do in any industry. I mean, I watch public speakers now that have been speaking as long as I've been breathing. I mean, they've been in the business for 40 years and they're remarkable. Well, no shit, they're remarkable. They've been doing it for 40 years. When I've been doing this for 40 years, I'm hoping I'm fairly good at my craft too. So one thing I've learned, and this is in any walk of life, and it's one of the best pieces of advice someone has given me, and that's why I'm thankful to have an opportunity to share it with you and your listeners, is don't play the comparison game, because you will always lose that game. I mean, I'm in my apartment right now. I could walk outside and within 5 minutes, I can find someone taller, faster, with more muscles, someone that's more handsome, somebody that's funnier, somebody that has more money, someone that's a better speaker, someone that has a hotter girlfriend, whatever metric you could think of, if I use that to be my barometer for self-worth, I will always lose that game, because no matter what, there's always someone better. I mean, criminy, what we're watching LeBron James do right now is absolutely remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet on some level, he's still in the shadow of Michael Jordan. I mean, no matter how great he is, someone's going to say, yeah, but you're not as good as Michael Jordan. LeBron's worth, I don't know, $400 million, which, ain't too shabby. Well, Oprah's worth $3 billion, and yeah, Oprah, $3 billion. I'd say that's pretty impressive. Really? Well, Mark Zuckerberg's worth like $60 billion. Oh, really? So it doesn't matter. And it's not just about money. No matter what external barometer you use, if you play the comparison game, you'll always find someone better. So I've learned to do my best to stop playing that game. And when I give a talk, it's not, could someone else have done a better job? It's not, hey, was this talk better than Trey would have done? No, it has nothing to do with that. It's, did I just deliver the best talk that I was capable of? And if the answer to that is yes, great, then keep doing that. If the answer is no, then I got to look back on my preparation and go, why? Why did I not do the best I was capable of?
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to fix that. And I think, if nothing else, if we can all learn to not be content, but to feel good about giving our best effort, the results will end up taking care of themselves.
Sure. Well, because everybody wants to compare themselves to Gary Vee and Tony Robbins and all the internet stars out there, but they don't see the work that they put in. Like, we're at where they at their beginning. So this is where they're at today is the result of all that hard work, all that discipline, all that watching film, taking notes, picking their performances apart. Nobody sees that. They just see the end result and where they're at. Gary Vee making content every day on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and then Tony Robbins, having his island, his hotels, his companies, his 33 companies, whatever, his books, 600-page books. They don't see the hard work that goes into that. And it's kind of like you can't compare yourself to that because you might be where they were 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's exactly how I look at it, and I try to talk to people.
That's so insightful and so well said. And social media kind of aggravates that a bit because for the most part, I didn't come up with the saying. I've seen it on Facebook a million times, but it's kind of like, we're comparing our behind the scenes to everybody else's highlight reel. I mean, all you see is, now I've been listening to Tony Robbins for 10, 15 years and just to see how much better he's gotten even in that time. is remarkable. And yeah, Gary Vee will be the first to tell you. I mean, for the first 10 years, nobody even knew who he was, but he kept picking away and kept building his foundation brick by brick. And then now he's earned and deserved the success that he gets. But, but still, I mean, even Gary will say, obviously he's very adamant about the fact that he wants to own the Jets one day. So if he's comparing himself right now, well, there's 30 people that own an NFL franchise that he doesn't. So is that supposed to make him feel less about himself? No, it shouldn't. And thankfully for somebody like him that's incredibly confident and self-aware and secure, it doesn't. But yeah, the comparison game will really get you nowhere. It's a matter of learning to be happy, fulfilled, feel significant in what you're doing. And if for any reason you don't feel those things, then you need to make some internal changes, not look for external validation.
Absolutely. So I promised my listeners I would kind of focus more so on failure than successes on here. I feel like every person that I talk to is kind of like we build up on success. So I want to know, how has failure set you up for success? Like, what is your favorite failure that you've had that has taught you the biggest lesson in life?
To me, it's a framing thing. It's all about mindset. When I was younger, and still I'm trying to have this mind shift. The word failure always had this negative connotation. If you failed at a subject or you failed on a test or you failed to make the team, that was a bad thing. It really wasn't until I was an adult that started to get flipped, that I started to realize, as everybody else talks about, failure is part of the process, and that if you use failure correctly, it can be your fuel to move forward, and that failure is all a part of it. So the good part is now, I wouldn't say that I'm numb to it because I'm not a robot. I do have feelings and so forth, but I've learned to be fairly resilient, and the things that most people consider a failure, I just brush off and keep going. I mean,
Sure.
At attempting to be a professional speaker, 9 out of every 10 gigs that I go for, I don't get. And I don't even consider those failures. I just figured, hey, they weren't a good fit. Either I wasn't right for their audience or, what I charge as a fee isn't right for them. I don't take it personal, but I could easily let that affect me. And I know the baseball analogy has been overdone, but it's something to the effect of, if you only hit the ball 3 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like you can fail 7 times and you're one of the best hitters in the history of the game. And that's kind of the way I look at this. I'm very thankful that I've never had any major colossal rock bottom failures. I've never gone bankrupt. I've, never been on my deathbed. I've never been homeless, any of the major ones that some people have had to go through. So I have lived a very privileged life, but I mentioned earlier, I'm amicably divorced. I got into a relationship believing that I would be with someone for the rest of my life. And for a variety of reasons, that no longer was a good fit. So one could easily say that I failed at marriage, but I don't choose to look at it that way. I choose to look at it as, I got in a relationship that didn't turn out the way that I thought it would. And that's okay. And now I'm better for it and we'll move on to the next one. I remember, a time that I was actually hired as University of Maryland's basketball strength and conditioning coach. Only worked there for 2 weeks, and then they realized that they were not going to be able to make that a position that they had promised. And so I wasn't really fired. It was basically I worked for 2 weeks in a job that was non-existent. But that was one that I really took to heart because I was so excited and was really looking forward to being a part of that program. And then 2 weeks later, it was kind of yanked out from underneath me through no fault of my own. But it was still, it was painful. It was quite a sting to it.
Sure.
So these little ups and downs, they happen all of the time. And
Sure.
I try, but I also do that with the successes. I try never to get too high and I try never to get too low. If I reach out and try to speak at a conference and they accept and they have me, okay, great. I'm happy for that. Now let's prepare. I'm not going to go celebrate for 3 weeks on it. And if I reach out to speak at a conference and they say, no, thank you, you're not a good fit, we went with someone else, I may be a little down in the dumps that evening, but I wake up the next morning and it's already in the rearview mirror. It's time to move on. And, so I do think for your listeners, it's all on how you approach it. And if you look at failure or adversity as just a minor roadblock, just a minor stepping stone, then that's all it'll be. If you choose to dwell on it and make it this big catastrophic event every time, I do think that will hinder your progress.
I love it. That's a good answer. Everyone knows, well, my listeners, I should say, not everyone, but they know how I feel about work-life balance. It should just be life. Tell me what your perspective is on work-life balance.
Well, you teed that up perfectly because you and I share a very similar perspective. I've always been fascinated by the English language, and I'm a sucker for terminology and vernacular and the way that we use language and words and so forth. And the concept of work-life balance, just that the premise I understand. I know that when most people say that, what they mean is don't spend all of your life working, spend some time doing the other things in life so that you have more of a balanced approach. And that overall perspective I can applaud and appreciate. But this construct of work-life balance has never worked for me for a few reasons. One, it puts them on opposite ends of the spectrum. It compartmentalizes them. It basically says you have work in this box and you have life in this box. And, that when you're of adult age and you're in your prime years of working, that's just not realistic. Like, I would never relegate you as a man to what you do. I mean, you have what you do and you have who you are, but it's still a big component of what we do at this age. And, I don't think you need to separate those things. I think your work is a part of your life. And if you found your calling and you found your why and you found something that really drives you, you don't want to separate it. That should be a part of who you are because it's going to make you a better husband. It's going to make you a better father. It's going to make you a better leader. All of these things that I'm preaching to companies around the world, I use them myself to be a better father. I use them to be better in my community. I use them to be a better ex-husband. Like, I don't want to separate these things. I want them all working in harmony. The other reason I don't like that vernacular is, for me, and this is just a terminology thing, when I hear the word balance, it implies equality, which means if I work 50 hours in a week, then I guess I'm supposed to be playing with my kids for 50 hours also. And mathematically, that's impossible. So to me, it's not about scorekeeping, and it's not about just work. If you love what you do and you do purposeful, meaningful work that pours into other people, I don't think you should have to put constraints on that. I think you should be responsible enough that you're pouring into the other things in your life that matter, your relationships, your children, your hobbies. So it's for me, the best way to describe work-life balance is just to live in the present moment, is to be where your feet are. So when I'm on this podcast with you, this is the only thing I'm doing right now. I don't have the TV on. I'm not scrolling through Twitter. My kids aren't running around. Like, I am in my apartment in complete silence, giving you my full undivided attention. And this is where my feet are. So this is where my head and my heart are. An hour ago, as you and I were texting back and forth, I was with my children. And when I'm with my children, it's important to be with my children. So to me, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And wherever you are and whatever you're doing, be there and be all in. And if you can do that, then everything takes care of itself. So when I'm on vacation, I'm on vacation. When I'm in the middle of giving a presentation, I am there, mind, body, and soul. And for me, just focusing, as you said, on life and flow and harmony, it works so much better for me. All those years that I was wrestling with work-life balance, it was such a struggle because I was always swimming upstream. I mean, I would stop work early to be with my kids, and then I would feel like my business is suffering, and I'm not really with them. And, I'm with them physically, but I'm not with them mentally. And it was just this tug of war. And now I don't keep score. I go with the flow and I pour into wherever I am.
I love it, man. Alan Stein getting me fired up.
Yes, sir. Trey Downs in the building.
Yes, sir. Running through walls. So I'm a big fan of quotes. I love quotes. I put them everywhere. They're on my cell phone. They're in my car. They're, in my room. You have a quote that's on the wall at Penn State University. Tell us what that quote is, and tell me what it felt like when you saw your name up there in quotations.
Well, the quote is, "Are the habits you have today on par with the dreams you have for tomorrow?" And like many things, now I've been a quote nerd since high school. So when I started writing down quotes, it was literally in a yellow legal pad with an ink pen. And then over time, with the advent of computers, that's now morphed into a Word doc. And now I've got a spreadsheet. But I've always loved quotes. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other quotes out there that kind of mean the same thing. But that's one that really I kind of learned from that lesson from Kobe Bryant about, sticking to the basics and making sure you have good habits, because the habits that you have today I mean, they really determine who and where you'll be tomorrow. And it was funny. I didn't even know that was up at Penn State until somebody took a picture of it and sent it to me, which
Really?
was really neat. It's not like they reached out and said, "Hey, can we use it?" I mean, I was all for it. I mean, they gave me credit. It was amazing. So I felt really cool about that. And it's funny. I'm actually in talks with them now about going and giving a talk to the football team and the basketball team at the end of the summer. Which would be really cool because, I mean, they don't even know who I am. I think they just saw the quote and liked the quote. But now, I mean, for me, to have an opportunity to go to speak to a prestigious program like Penn State football and do so in front of a giant mural that has my quote on it it'll be surreal. So it's really neat. And, that's a quote that I try to live by and certainly try to share with my children. But yeah, I'm like you, man. I'm a quote nerd. There's a couple others that I really like. I have 3 children. And of course, if you said, which one of your kids do you love the most? As any parent will tell you, I love them all the same. So it's the same thing with quotes. I mean, I have thousands of them in a database. So it's hard for me to pick a favorite. But, that one that Penn State put up is definitely one of my favorite. One that I absolutely love that's as simple as can be is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Which, we got to put some action into our knowledge. And then another one that I like that's always kind of been at the backbone of my belief system is, it's talking about like the can't versus the won't. And it's, if you do things that others won't do, you will have things that others won't have. And I just love that, and you could use don't, you could say, if you do things others don't do, you will have things others don't have. But either way, it makes sense. And it can be tied into any of these things. Like, this has nothing to do with money or material items. Go back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation. Most people don't or won't actively listen in their relationship. Yeah. So if you actively listen, you'll probably have a more connected marriage than most people have. So you do something that most people won't do, you'll have something that most people won't have. So it's not just about grinding it out and working hours and trying to make millions of dollars. Has nothing to do with that. It's the little things that, that if you do those regularly, habitually, you'll have things that other people don't have.
That's awesome. Tell us about your book that's coming out in 2019.
I'm really excited for it. I mean, I've known kind of in the back of my mind for years that a book was on my bucket list. I've always felt that I had a book in me and wanted to just, put something on paper that was tangible, that would live on. Of course, the competitor in me would love for it to be some type of bestseller, but, I've come to the point where I'm not worried about any of those external accolades. My goal is just to write and produce the best book that I'm capable of. And if it sells 500 copies or 5 million copies, it doesn't matter to me. That's not the goal. I mean, I'm not doing it to make money because I don't know if you know, it's very, very, very hard to make money writing a book. Yeah. Unless you're,
your first book, especially.
Yes, absolutely. So it's been a wonderful process. I actually have a co-author that I hired that's been really helpful. I'm a decent writer. But what he's really been able to help with is kind of the organization of thoughts and doing some of the backup research necessary. So it's been a really fun process working with him. He's been phenomenal. And the book it's called Raise Your Game, The Secrets of the Best. And we explained very early in the book that we use the word secrets just to kind of raise the hype and get people to buy it. There are no secrets to being successful or happy. And we make that very clear. This is not we're trying to trick you. When you get in there and are like, oh, you need to have self-awareness. Yeah, that shouldn't be a secret. I mean, that's something people should know. But yeah, the book's been fun. It's going to technically be a business book. It's written for folks that want to draw lessons from the athletic world and apply them to business, since that's the lane I'm in. But I was very intentional in writing it so that parents would benefit from it, sport coaches would benefit from it, and even players. Like I'm going to recommend every basketball player I've ever worked with that they get it because I think it will help them as well. And it's been fun. And, we look at it from 3 different vantage points. We look at it from kind of the head coach position, from a player's position, and from a team's perspective, which would be the same as, a CEO an employee, and a business. So it doesn't matter which terminology you use, but we really break down the most important traits for each one of those. I've got tons of stories of working with some high performers, and I interviewed some really good people for it. So we just turned in the manuscript recently. I was fortunate enough to get a publishing deal with the Hachette Group up in New York. So we'll get the manuscript back, put the finishing touches on it, and then this fall will be time to kind of pre-launch and get it out there. And I'm excited because that's all very new to me. I know very little about what it takes to launch and promote a book, about what it takes to actually sell some units and get it into some hands. So this will be a learning experience for me, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to put something on paper that I thought encapsulated my journey and my lessons, and learn as much as I can. And since I'm so devoted to self-development and growth, I've already got the framework for a second book in the back of my mind. I mean, I'll take a breather after this one for sure. But I'm hoping that I learned so much just on the writing and promotion process that I'm going to want to do it again and see if I can improve that learning curve. So it's slated to be ready in January. But I would imagine anybody following me on social will start hearing about it pretty regularly this fall.
That's awesome. Yeah. All I ask is that I get one of the hard copies. You know what I mean?
You can have as many as you want.
After it.
I'll sign it. Whatever I can do for you, man, I'd be happy to. I'll send you a gang of them, and you can raffle them off to your listeners. I mean, I just want to get them into people's hands. Again, I'm not going to make money off of it, so I'm not worried about sales. I'm worried about actually creating change. And if, as you can imagine, there would be no greater feeling. I mean, this is speculation because I've never written a book, but this has happened after some of my talks and some other things that I've done. But if somebody just dropped me an unsolicited direct message or an email that just said, "Hey, man, I read your book. Thank you so much. It's really helped me. I'm going to change A, B, and C now." Like, that is fulfilling, meaningful work. That's why I do what I do. And certainly we all need to be compensated for what we do, but I don't do what I do for the money. I do it because I believe in it and I want to create change. But I've learned that in a capitalistic society, if you're good at those things, people will pay you pretty good money to do it. So it's a way for me to provide for my family doing what I love. But I can't think of any better high than to get an unsolicited message that says, "Hey, man, I read your book and it's had an impact on my life." That would be cool. And whether that was one
awesome.
person, 10 people, or 10,000, that's why I'm writing the book.
That's awesome. So shifting gears. Well, you know what? Actually, I have to ask you about your Kobe experience. Like, it's been killing me.
Sure.
Tell me about that.
So I had a chance. Nike in 2007 decided to create these skills academies. And what they did was they wanted to bring in their premier players that were Nike players and create skills academies for high school and college players, where it wasn't just one of these camps where the guy just comes in and waves and everybody wears a Kobe t-shirt. They wanted the player to actually be there and be one of the primary teachers to teach directly to the players. And they felt that would be really influential. 2007 was really a big time where people were complaining that youth basketball was losing fundamentals and that people were just playing games and the game was starting to get corrosive and eroded. So Nike really wanted to be at the forefront of changing that. So they decided to hold these skills academies. And, by most people's accounting in 2007, I mean, Kobe was the best player in the game. I mean, Michael Jordan had already retired a couple times at that point, and LeBron was still great, but he wasn't the LeBron that we're watching today. He was still climbing that mountain. So Kobe was really, he was the premier player in the game. And I got a chance to work this skills academy. It was the first one they ever had because of my relationship at Montrose, and got a chance to go work it and had a chance to watch him do a private workout really early one morning. And I just remember being blown away by how basic the stuff he was doing was. He was doing very basic pivoting drills and very basic offensive moves. Now, he was doing them at an unparalleled level of intensity. And, this is Kobe Bryant, so everything he was doing had razor-sharp precision. But it was still very basic stuff. And that's really where, I had a chat with him later that day asking him why he did such basic stuff. And he basically said that's why he's as good of a player as he is because he doesn't get bored with the basics and that he sticks to them and sticks to the fundamentals. And, I just remember leaving going, okay, if the best basketball player in the world can stick to fundamentals and create good habits, then obviously I should be doing the same thing. And, that left a very big impact on me. So I would bet you $1 million he doesn't even remember the interaction, but that that small interaction to him actually changed the course of my life. And to me, that's where I learned how important this type of stuff is. I mean, I guarantee if you put him on a lie detector test, he wouldn't even remember it. I mean, how many times has he had a side conversation with quote unquote a fan? Like, it happens a million times. So he probably doesn't remember it, but I remember it as one of the most pivotal things in my life. And same thing. I mean, I'm clearly not anywhere in the ballpark of having Kobe's stature, but if I could give a talk and one person hearing my talk heard one thing that makes them change something for the better in their life, that's pretty awesome. And I may never even know it. They may never even have a chance to tell me, but that's what that's why we should be doing what we do. So that, and I have thankfully lots of stories like that where coaches and players have done something or said something or taught me something, or I've observed something that's had a very profound impact. I mean, another story I tell all the time, I'm a huge Duke fan, and I'm a Coach K loyalist, and I had a chance to meet Coach K one time, and I was just enamored with the fact here I was talking to my idol, and I went home that night and I handwrote him a thank you note that just said, "Hey, thank you so much for your time today, Coach. I don't know if you know how much that meant to me. I wish you and Duke continued success." And just figured that was the right thing to do. I'm old school. I was raised, if someone goes out of their way to do something for you, you handwrite them a thank you note. So I did my part. 3 weeks later, I get a handwritten note back from Coach K, basically thanking me and saying, "No, Alan, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed learning about what you do at Montrose. You're doing a great job. Keep it up." And, Coach K's written hundreds of thousands of those. I don't think he remembers writing it to me. So that little thing that he did, which probably took him 60 seconds, has had a profound impact on my life. I still have that card. It is literally 5 feet away from me right now in a fireproof safe. I occasionally take it out at speaking engagements and show it, but I'm not a big possessions guy. I'm kind of a minimalist. That is one of my prized possessions. And it just, again, it speaks volumes to the fact that little things can make a huge difference, and that there really are no such thing as little things when you look at them in that regard. But, I don't know that he knew that, hey, I'm going to scribble this out, and in 60 seconds, I'm going to mail something that is going to change someone's life. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, your brand is built on that foundation, the basics with Kobe. Like, even though it was like a side conversation, your brand is built on the basics. Like that lesson right there, Coach K's letter or his note to you, that's what inspired you to be who you are today. That's your brand. So that's powerful right there.
And it's something I'm teaching my children, which means it's going to go past me. I mean, a 60-second note will end up getting passed down to my children. I don't mean the tangible note. I mean the concept of doing small things and kind gestures to other people makes a difference. I mean, it will affect, and I know for a fact that he's done that for a lot of other people, because I have other friends that he's written letters to. So, I mean, that's kind of going viral before social media going viral. I mean, that's, if he's written 1,000 handwritten letters and affected 1,000 lives, and certainly for me, I mean, I have told that story no shortage of 300 times, sometimes in front of live audiences with a couple hundred people, sometimes on a podcast that could have thousands and thousands of listeners. So something he did in 60 seconds has been shared with, I'm not kidding, hundreds of thousands of people. And he doesn't do that to get a feather in his cap. He does it because it's the right thing to do. And then if any one of your listeners right now is listening to my story about that, and now they take that and now they're affected by the fact that Coach K wrote me a letter, or that Kobe let me watch his workout. It really is. It's kind of this pay it forward mentality, and we should all be here to lift each other up. And it's really neat, and it's really powerful. Awesome. And on a smaller scale, I try to do the same type of thing. I mean, I have young strength coaches that reach out to me all of the time, and I do my very best to try to help them or point them in the right direction, or at the very least respond and just say, hey, my plate is too full to help you with this at the moment, but just know that I'm rooting for you and I wish you the best. Good luck. And I hope that tiny gesture puts a little bit of a pep in their step. It's better than, you sending an email and it just going off into the abyss and you never hear back from someone. So in our own way, we can do these little things that add up and make a big difference. But with that being said, it should also give us tremendous empathy and compassion when you deal with somebody like a LeBron James or a Stephen Curry, or even now. I mean, I met Kevin Durant when he was 15 years old, and he lived here in PG County, and now he's arguably the second best player in the world. I mean, he's much harder to get a hold of these days than he was when he was 15, and I could just go pick him up and take him to the gym. And I respect that. Kevin must have millions of fans reaching out to him, and it's just, I mean, he can't write millions of letters or return millions of emails or shake everybody's hand and take a picture with everyone, and that, I feel for those guys on that level. I mean, and that's what can be hard because, if Kevin's out to dinner with a friend and 100 people walk up to him and ask him for an autograph and a picture, and he does it for 99 of them, and then on the 100th one, it just says, look, man, I'm sorry. I'm trying to enjoy a dinner with my friend. That one person is going to be like, dude, KD's a dick. He doesn't have time for anybody else. And how unfair is that? So, I'm very thankful that I still live a life of anonymity, that it's not like I'm getting recognized anywhere. So there's plenty of opportunity that if someone does need something from me, I can give back, and I feel good about that. But these folks that are on a whole nother stratosphere of celebrity, I just can't imagine that. I mean, LeBron James can't go anywhere.
No, he can't.
He can't just go to the mall with his kids or go to the movies or go to the grocery store. And while he's certainly well compensated and appears to have a pretty good life regardless, that would be a tough pill to swallow. So with all that, I say that to kind of circle back to the story of, if you write somebody a letter, you don't expect them to write you back. You write them a letter because it's the right thing for you to do. And if they write you back, that's great. But you don't do it because you're going to get something or out of expectation. You just do it because it's right.
So to wrap it up, I want you to talk me up. I want you to give me some inspiration right now. I am dragging ass every day going into work, not really inspired, and I want you to talk me up. I'm in a rut. I am trying to light that spark inside of my soul to find my why, and I need help. I need Alan Stein to come in there, kick me in the ass, and light me up. So go ahead.
Well, the first thing I would ask you was, are you sure you're on the right bus? I mean, if you're dragging to work every day, then maybe that's not the best place for you. Maybe that's not your why. Maybe you should be somewhere else, because I think when you really tap into your why, it's not to me. I'm a realist now. I mean, I love what I do, but don't think I'm smiling and chipper every moment of every day. And I don't wake up every single day thinking, I mean, we live in a real world, but I do think that when you find something you're really passionate about and you find something that you're really good at, then you just need to find where those 2 points intersect. And that's really your sweet spot. I mean, I'm passionate about leadership and cohesion and accountability. And I'm fairly good at speaking and communicating and sharing that message. So I found my sweet spot. So you don't have to pull teeth to get me to do what I'm doing. So the first question I'd ask is, with some self-awareness, are you sure you're on the right bus? I mean, is this rut? Is this because you're on the wrong bus going to the wrong spot? Because if so, let's get you off and get you on the right bus. And then once we get you on the right bus, let's make sure you're in the right seat. And I think if we can do that, then the other stuff just starts to fall in place. I mean, everything requires work. Even a good marriage requires work, but it shouldn't be this painstaking, grit your teeth, grind it out work. I mean, if that describes your marriage, I think you might be married to the wrong person. Again, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some low times and some disagreements. That's all part of being in a relationship. But, I don't think anything should be that much work and that much of a grind. And I hate that word. I'm so tired of entrepreneurs talking about grind it out and grind it. Man, that is the last word I want on my tombstone. If anyone says, man, Alan's life was a grind, forget that. I don't want that to describe me. Now, I believe in having a relentless work ethic, and I believe in working smart. I believe in being consistent. But I guess it's just a terminology thing for me. I don't want it to be a grind. So I'd say if you feel like you're in a major, major rut, I would do some internal soul searching first and figure out if you're in the right spot. And if you're not, let's get you in the right spot, because I think that will completely change your perspective and your mindset on everything that you're doing. Because, motivation and inspiration is very short-lived. I can give people kind of a pep talk and get them excited to go run through a wall for an afternoon or maybe even the next day. But after that, they're on their own. And so you need to find something and give people some more practical, actionable strategies that they can implement. And, I know you know everything that you need to be happy and successful. Now, whether or not you're doing it is a completely other discussion, but it's very rare that lack of knowledge is the reason that people get stuck or put in a rut. It's not from lack of knowing, it's from lack of doing. And perfect example with your listeners right now. If I had all of your listeners take out a pen and write down the healthiest foods that they know of, they could do that in a heartbeat. If I asked all of your listeners how much sleep should they get every night, they would give me an answer in a split second. And if I asked them all to kind of etch out what they should do for a physical fitness workout routine, they don't need to design it for men's or women's health, but I guarantee they'd write down, hey, 2 to 3 times a week for 45 minutes to an hour, just do something physically active, whatever. They would do it. They know what to do. But a lot of people don't do those things. They know to do those things, but they don't do them. There's something that's getting in the way, and it's creating what's called a performance gap. And that's the gap between what you know and what you do. And everybody has them. And the key to being happy and successful and significant and fulfilled is closing those gaps. So when you're stuck in a rut, it's probably because you're not doing something that you're supposed to do. I mean, you're supposed to avoid electronics for an hour before you go to bed and put yourself to bed at a good time and wake up and do something physically active and eat a healthy breakfast. Like, we all know that we're supposed to do these things, yet most people don't do them. And, I find that if you do that, if you find your passion, you find what you're good at, you take care of your body, you take care of your mind, you work on your emotional intelligence, you pour into relationships. If you do all of those things, life's pretty damn good. I mean, and I don't think anyone listening to this right now, their head did not explode because I didn't say anything that they don't already know. So just do these things. And I don't say them, it goes back to the basic but not easy. Everything I just said is incredibly basic, but none of this stuff is easy. These are things that I still struggle with and have challenges with, and that's okay. But the admission needs to be that it's not from lack of knowing. So, if you were stuck in a rut, I would say make sure you're in the right spot. Once you know you're in the right spot, then let's start figuring out ways to close the gap between what you're supposed to do and what you should do. I mean, I know I keep referencing marriage only because I think a lot of people can
Sure.
appreciate
No,
that.
it's
But
important.
like, take marriage. If your marriage is shitty right now, you know why it's shitty. Like, now
Yeah.
you may choose to hide behind it and point the finger and say, well, the reason my marriage isn't good is because of her and she doesn't do this or she does this. That's not why. You know why. There's breakdowns in communication, that you're not showing signs of affection, that you're not like, there's a whole list of them, and everybody knows, but they're not doing. And that's really, once we can start closing that gap between knowing and doing, then performance goes up. And when performance goes up, confidence and self-belief goes up. And when confidence and self-belief goes up, so does happiness, fulfillment, and success. These things are all related.
I love it. Getting back to the basics.
Yes, sir.
Getting back to the basics.
Always.
His name is Alan Stein Jr. Check him out on his website. He is a motivational speaker, coach, corporate coach. He will get you fired up for life. Alan, thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Trey.
I want to say thank you to my boy Alan Stein, Steiner brother, coming on the show today and just lighting us up and giving us a ton of knowledge and a ton of valuable content that we will be able to play over and over again, get the message over and over again. Thank you, brother. Check him out at alansteinjr.com. Check him out on all the major platforms. He's everywhere. Check him out on YouTube. You can see his keynote speeches. You can see all of his material, all of his content online. He will light you up. I'm telling you, be careful, caution. You will run through a wall. That's my boy. So reach out to him and he will help you out with whatever you need help with, get you back on that bus. Music in this episode was provided by Bryce Alvord from Soho Kings. You can check him out at brycealvord.com. Make sure to get over there and download his music. It's legit. Also, I want to say thank you to all the listeners for downloading and checking us out. Make sure to rate us and review us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at downstrey. I do a lot of posting over there, so you'll see a ton of content. Make sure to go to my website, yoursuperiorself.com, and hit me up. I want to know what you think. All right, guys. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.